I was standing in the middle of my living room, the eviction notice crumpled in my hand, staring out at the city's skyline through my floor-to-ceiling window. The sunlight hit the hardwood floors just right, and for a brief moment, it almost felt serene. Almost. My phone buzzed again on the marble counter, and I could hear my own heartbeat over the faint hum of traffic below. "Sam, we're giving the apartment to your brother," my mother had shouted on the phone earlier, her voice sharp with certainty, leaving no room for argument. I froze when I saw the name on the notice. Not mine. His. It would have been easy to crumble right there, to feel the sting of betrayal, but something inside me steadied. I smoothed my silk blouse, the one I'd bought after my first promotion, and ran my fingers along the embossed leather of my handbag. Every detail reminded me of how far I had come, farther than they knew, farther than they cared to see. I took a slow breath, letting the anger simmer just beneath the surface. The irony wasn't lost on me. The family who had dismissed me for years, the same ones who'd always favored my brother, now expected me to quietly hand over what I'd worked so hard to create. I clenched the notice in my fist, feeling the paper cut lightly into my skin. And I realized for the first time in a long time that I wasn't just hurt, I was ready to show them exactly who I had become. I still remember that night like it was yesterday, even though it had been over a decade ago. I was 21, fresh out of college, clutching my first paycheck, and full of hope that my family would be proud. Instead, I found myself in the kitchen, the fluorescent light harsh and unflattering, as my parents and my older brother, Ryan, yelled over each other. "You're not ready for responsibility, Samantha," my father barked, shaking his head. "This apartment should go to Ryan. He's stable. He can handle it." My hands trembled as I gripped the counter, trying to steady my voice. "I've been working for years. I've saved up, I pay my bills. Enough," my mother interrupted, her tone final, slicing through every argument I had prepared. "We've decided. It's his." I felt the heat rise to my face, my chest tightening like it would burst. I wanted to cry, to scream, to throw something, anything, but I knew it would make no difference. They had already made up their minds. I was the quiet one, the sensitive one, the daughter they could dismiss without consequence. That's when I noticed the small, worn journal on the counter, my grandmother's gift before she passed. Its leather cover smelled faintly of lavender, and inside, she had written, "Samantha, your worth is not measured by their approval. Stand tall, work hard, and claim the life you deserve. Always believe in yourself." I pressed the journal to my chest, the words sinking in like sunlight through a window. For the first time, I realized that the fight wasn't with them, it was with the version of me that believed their approval defined my worth. That night, I made a quiet but irrevocable decision. I would leave the house, yes. I would carve my own path. I would struggle, I would fall, but I would rise stronger than they could imagine. I wouldn't need their validation. And if they ever doubted me again, I would show them the power of a woman who refused to be underestimated. I packed my few belongings, hugged the people who supported me quietly, and walked out into the night, feeling both the sting of loss and the thrill of freedom. That decision would define the next 10 years of my life, the years that built the woman standing in her apartment today, holding an eviction notice that wasn't hers to begin with. The first few months after I left home were brutal. I rented a tiny studio in a part of the city I barely knew, the walls bare, the floors creaking with every step. I worked 2 jobs, one in a marketing firm by day, another as a freelance designer by night, barely keeping my head above water. Sleep became a luxury, and self-doubt was a constant companion. But I held on to my grandmother's journal. Every night, before collapsing into bed, I traced her words with my fingers and whispered them to myself. Your worth is not measured by their approval. It became a lifeline, a compass pointing me toward the person I wanted to be. Then came Mr. Anderson, a seasoned executive at the marketing firm. He noticed my persistence, my attention to detail, the way I refused to quit even when the odds were stacked against me. "You've got talent, Samantha," he said one afternoon over coffee, "but talent without strategy gets lost. Let me help you channel it." With his guidance, I started taking on bigger projects, staying late to learn everything I could about branding, client acquisition, and digital marketing. I remember the nights I stayed until the office lights flickered off, my fingers stiff on the keyboard, the city lights below reflecting my tired but determined gaze. Every small win, a successfully launched campaign, a client who praised my work, a payment that covered more than just rent, was fuel for my fire. Slowly, I began building my own brand. I kept it quiet from my family, posting only modest updates on social media, never revealing the real extent of my success. They saw a struggling young woman, while I was quietly transforming into a confident, independent force. By my late 20s, I had a portfolio that spoke louder than any words. I had clients who trusted me implicitly, a growing team that respected my vision, and a financial independence I'd once thought impossible. Every milestone, my first profitable deal, my first solo client meeting, my first tiny office, felt like a secret victory over the family that had doubted me. And yet, I never celebrated alone. I remembered the people who had believed in me when my family hadn't. Mr. Anderson, my college mentor, friends who stayed when others left. Their support was a quiet reminder that family wasn't just the people who shared your blood. It was the people who lifted you when life tried to push you down. I often walked past my old neighborhood, sometimes stopping by the corner where Ryan had once gotten the better of me. I'd smile to myself, thinking about how different life was now. The girl they thought would fail was thriving, and they had no idea. That's how I wanted it. Until the day came that I decided it was time to confront the past, not with anger, but with undeniable truth. The knock at my apartment door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not my family. I smoothed the silk blouse I'd chosen for the evening, the one that made me feel powerful without shouting it, and took a deep breath. My apartment, the one they thought they could hand to Ryan, was my sanctuary now, a reflection of every struggle I had survived and every victory I had quietly claimed. I opened the door. My mother, father, and Ryan stood there, eyes wide, mouths slightly open, as if they had walked into the wrong place. My heart beat steadily, but inside, a fire of anticipation burned. "Hi," I said smoothly, keeping my voice calm, almost casual, though every inch of me wanted to let the tension simmer. "I wasn't expecting you." My mother, ever quick to fill silence, cleared her throat. "Samantha, we need to talk about the apartment." I gestured for them to enter. "Of course. Come in. Let me show you something." They stepped into the living room, and I watched their expressions change from irritation to confusion to awe. My apartment wasn't just a space, it was a statement. Expensive art I had picked out with careful attention hung on the walls. The shelves held books I had pored over during long nights of learning and growth. A sleek office corner displayed awards, framed certificates, and photographs from events I had attended alone, yet triumphant. Ryan's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. My father's eyes darted around, finally resting on the eviction notice I had laid on the coffee table. I leaned against the edge of the couch, letting the silence stretch. "I assume this is why you're here," I said, nodding toward the notice. "The one that has my apartment going to Ryan. Funny, isn't it? Because, technically, it never belonged to him. Or to any of you." My mother's lips pressed together, her voice trembling slightly. "But we thought that I was the struggling daughter you could ignore." I finished for her, smiling faintly. "Well, you thought wrong." I took a slow step forward, letting the truth settle in the room like sunlight spilling through my windows. I bought this apartment myself. I earned every penny. And the reason I never told you is because I wanted to see if I could do it on my own. And I did. Ryan's face paled, and my father's hand twitched toward the eviction notice, as if trying to reclaim some authority. "Samantha, we didn't know." "You didn't know because you never wanted to know," I said, my voice steady but edged with quiet power. "I didn't need approval then, and I don't need it now. This apartment, this life, I built it. You were never part of the plan." My mother's eyes glistened with shame, a rare moment of clarity. Ryan, usually brash and arrogant, looked smaller than I had ever seen him. They had expected weakness, and instead, they found a woman who had outgrown their petty favoritism, who had transformed every slight into fuel for her ascent. I let the words hang in the air for a beat longer before I added, softening slightly. I'm not saying we can't have a relationship, but it has to be on new terms. Ones where respect comes first. And just like that, the power shifted. The girl they had tried to dismiss was no longer the one they could control. She was Samantha Hayes, independent, strong, and unyielding. I watched them silently, my family standing awkwardly in my living room, the tension thick enough to touch. This was the moment I had envisioned for years. Not revenge, not shouting, not proving them wrong, but control on my terms. I had the upper hand now, and I intended to wield it wisely. Before any of us moves forward, I began, my voice calm but firm. There are a few things that need to change. My mother's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. I let her wait. First, I continued, respect. Not just for me, but for everyone around you. The way you dismissed me all those years? That stops now. You can't take what isn't yours just because you think you're entitled. That behavior has no place in my life. My father shifted uneasily, probably realizing for the first time that authority doesn't come automatically with age or title. I nodded toward him. You need to support my choices without judgment. If I succeed, I succeed. If I fail, it's on me, and I expect no interference. Ryan, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke, his voice lower than usual. Samantha, I didn't. I held up a hand. I know, Ryan. But words are meaningless without action. You want to be part of my life? Then here's what you need to do. Work towards something you're proud of. Stop relying on shortcuts and family favoritism. Learn to earn your place, just like I did. I could see them processing, the weight of my expectations settling on their shoulders. I wasn't being cruel, I was being honest. Growth required clarity. And lastly, I added softer now, we need honesty. No more secrets, no more pretending. I will no longer be the person you overlook. If you want to be in my life, it has to be real, it has to be mutual, and it has to honor the boundaries I've set. I paused, letting the words land. The room was silent except for the hum of the city outside, as if even the world had stopped to listen. Then I smiled, the warmth returning to my voice. I care about all of you, and I want our relationships to work. But I will not bend to old patterns of favoritism, dismissal, or entitlement. You get to choose. Evolve or step aside. That's the only power I'm giving anyone anymore, the power to grow alongside me, not against me. I watched their reactions. My mother's shoulders softened. My father nodded slightly, as if finally understanding the lessons he had overlooked. Ryan's eyes met mine, a flicker of respect replacing the arrogance that had once defined him. It was empowering to set the rules, not out of malice, but out of self-respect. For years, I had hidden my potential, tolerated dismissal, and swallowed disappointment. Now I was free to dictate my life, free to love my family without being diminished, and free to define success on my own terms. I felt the familiar comfort of my grandmother's journal in my mind, her words echoing. Stand tall, work hard, and claim the life you deserve. Today, that life wasn't just claimed, it was being lived fully, without apology. Weeks passed after the confrontation, and slowly, I began to notice changes. My family didn't transform overnight. Old habits die hard, but the tension that had once defined our interactions eased. My mother started asking questions not to control, but to genuinely understand my life. She even complimented my apartment decor one afternoon, something small, yet monumental. My father, who had always measured success in traditional terms, began to listen more than he spoke. He asked about my projects, my clients, the late nights I had endured alone. And when I shared the highs and lows, I could see him registering a mixture of admiration and regret. Ryan, perhaps the most surprising, started showing signs of genuine effort. He enrolled in a certification program, something he had been putting off for years, and occasionally shared his progress with me, not to compete, but to seek advice. He was learning what I had learned long ago, that success earned through effort felt infinitely sweeter than privileges handed down. One quiet evening, I found myself sitting by the window, the city lights shimmering below, holding the worn leather journal my grandmother had given me. The lavender scent seemed to drift from the pages, and I smiled, remembering her words. Your worth is not measured by their approval. Stand tall, work hard, and claim the life you deserve. I realized then that my journey wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that resilience, hard work, and self-respect mattered more than validation from anyone else. It was about the life I had built, the woman I had become, and the relationships I was now willing to nurture, but on equal footing, with boundaries and honesty intact. I closed the journal, the pages soft and familiar, and let a sense of peace wash over me. I had confronted the past, claimed my space, and set the terms for the future. The apartment, the career, the freedom, they were more than symbols of success. They were evidence of my strength and perseverance. And as I looked out over the city, I whispered to myself, a quiet declaration that carried both triumph and grace. I am enough. I always was, and now the world sees it too. In that moment, I knew my story wasn't about revenge. It was about rising, about creating a life that no one could take from me, about loving without compromise, and about standing tall, unapologetically, as Samantha Hayes, fully, fiercely, and free.